The following program is for informational and educational purposes only and is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to Fraudsters Radio. I'm Lori Zook, nationally syndicated radio host and consumer advocate, and my co-host Storm Bradford will be joining us later in the show today, along with an attorney to talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act and suing the credit bureaus. Right now I have as my co-host Stuart Benner. Stuart, thank you for coming on with me.
Oh, my pleasure. I love your show, Lori. I really do.
Thank you. Well, we talked a little bit before the show today. I want to open up with scams because it's Christmas time, and the scammers are out in full force, making all kinds of phone calls, the robocalls. Now, you told me you got an Irs call, so what happened with yours?
Oh, it was hysterical. At first, it was this Indian calling me from Mumbai from the IRS. So I told him, I said, he called me on my cell phone, which is where I get most of these calls. I said I can't really talk on this call, but if you could call me in about 10 minutes, I really am very frightened and I'd like to talk to you. And I gave him the number of the studio line where I could record the whole conversation. And I had about a 20-minute conversation with him. It ended up he wanted me to buy a iTunes card or some kind of a card to pay the IRS. It's so ridiculous, but people fall for it. It's hard to imagine how anyone could fall for anything as ludicrous as this, but they do. It's terrible.
And a lot of people lose a lot. I mean, I know a lot of people too that have lost a lot of money. Now, last week I talked a little bit in the opening about a PayPal scam where I was on my phone and I went to Chrome and pulled up. I said PayPal phone number. And so it comes up with, PayPal has a bunch of listings in the top. Some are ads, but it'll have multiple under the actual PayPal logo phone numbers. And so, of course, the first phone number, I hit it. It's a toll-free number. Now, it was early in the morning. I don't drink coffee, so I'm not quite awake. And a man answers the phone. And I said, this is PayPal, right? And the guy goes, yes. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Like in the back of my mind, I'm going, PayPal usually has an automated answering system, with press one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it didn't seem right. But he asked me what the problem was, and I said, well, I have a newer PayPal account because I have multiple accounts, and I needed to check something on a transaction. Could he help me? So he asked me for the email, and then he asked me for the password. And I thought, well, I'm thinking, wait a minute, PayPal doesn't ask for the password. Well, he jumps in right away, and you ready? He tells me how much the transaction is for and who the transaction came from. And now I'm kind of like awake going, something still doesn't seem right. Well, in that moment, PayPal, on the automated system that they have, sends me a notice. Thank God I was sitting at the computer. And it says, PayPal, did you just change your password? Because if you didn't, to call this number right away. So I'm ready to get off the phone with the guy. I said, hey, I got to go. I got a thing that says someone changed my password, and it had to be that guy. And he goes, I'll call you back. And he goes, let me give you my direct number. And I hear someone in the background yelling to him a phone number starting with an 833 area code, probably out of the country. And at this point, I'm like, no, I got to go. I hang up. So I end up going into my PayPal account, changing all my passwords immediately. Now, here's the part that really irritated me. PayPal must have had something wrong that day because I called multiple times, and each time I called, it said there will be a 90 to 120-minute wait. Press 1 and we will call you back. So I press 1, and I'm sitting there thinking, maybe all my money's being sucked out of my account, who knows, but I got a little panicky. Yeah,
that's
and so
horrible.
And meantime, when I tried to pick up the call and they called back, they disconnected me. So then I had to do it again, so 2 hours goes by. And I pick up the call, and I tell the guy I need someone in the fraud department immediately. I think my money's being debited out of my account. He goes, well, I got to transfer you. So he transfers me, and for 45 minutes I'm on hold, and they disconnect me. Now I'm desperate. Meantime, I'm calling all of my banks, and they're all telling me you got to come in, and none of my banks are close. So I end up getting somebody on PayPal's Facebook page. I get a bot to chat with, then a real person who can't seem to understand what I'm saying, and then finally a supervisor gets on chat, and I'm explaining what's going on. So he said, you should be okay. You went in, you changed your password. Sorry it took us so long. And the kicker part of it was that night, my phone went off like 3 or 4 times. It was the PayPal automated system telling me that their system was broken and would not be in use, and goodbye. And I went,
wow,
I was like,
that's
okay,
terrible. Yeah, I've never
is.
been terribly crazy about PayPal. I'll tell you the truth. I have to offer it for our business because we have a lot of customers that use PayPal. But
right.
I do it a little differently. Unless someone goes direct to PayPal themselves and should pay me, if they're using our normal main charging system, they can click a PayPal option, but it's not going right from PayPal. It's going from Bank of America, Merchant Services, and First Data, which is, I think, the largest in the world. And it's very safe, and you can click a PayPal option, but it's connecting to PayPal through First Data. It's not connecting right to PayPal, so I think it's pretty safe that way. I use PayPal if I'm buying junk on eBay from some Indian and I don't want him to know my credit card. That's the only time I use it myself.
Yeah.
I don't use it for normal purchases.
Right, and see, I use it for business purposes, but I spent the next day going to each of my 3 banks, which, of course, I'm rural, so nothing's closed. And they're all going, you're okay. And so, my thing is I used to leave money sometimes in my PayPal account for weeks, and then I go, oh, better transfer the money. Now I'm thinking after what happened, no, I'm going to transfer the money right away into my bank because at least it's FDIC insured. If something goes wrong, then the bank has to deal with it because PayPal, I don't think they fall under regular banking here since they're like a global bank. But the kicker part of this story is that I have a friend that lives in the West Coast, and she called me like maybe 3 or 4 days later, and she says to me, I pulled up PayPal on my phone, and I saw this number, so I dialed it, and I got some guy who answered the phone, and she realized right away it was a scam because he was asking her about wiring money, and he would send her a gift card and all kinds of stuff, and she just kind of like listened for entertainment value, and I'm going, what's going on? But I did call PayPal back the next day, and I got someone right away, and I did give them the phone numbers. So I'm sitting here thinking, how many hundreds or thousands of people thought that was the real PayPal number under what is an actual PayPal appearing listing? How many people got suckered out of their money?
That's unbelievable. It really is. But what I find is these credit card companies, they don't really seem to care if there's a fraudulent charge. I mean that. Probably 2-3 years ago, I don't remember which bank it was, but one of my credit cards, I happened to check it, and I see a charge come through for several $1,000s, which I didn't make, and it was airline tickets to Russia.
Oh my God!
But the flight hadn't left yet, so I called them immediately. I reached the fraud department. I said, you can stop this charge. You can have them arrested at the airport, but they didn't do it. Oh, that's just part of our loss. We figure a certain amount of losses, and MasterCard, I think it was, they'll just go through their normal system. So they don't even try to catch the people. So they're in Russia. But I didn't have to pay for it. But still, somebody paid for it.
Yeah, that's sad. That's why everything goes up in price. It's still
Exactly. They don't do anything to really stop it when they had a chance. I gave them every chance to do it, and they didn't do it.
They didn't do it. But listen, how many shows have we done here to try to educate the public where attorneys don't get in trouble. The attorneys don't get in trouble with the Bar Association. The FBI says, hey, we don't have enough people, and the IRS too, we don't have enough people to get all these people, and they all seem to get away with it. And that's why the cost of everything is so expensive. But the most disappointing part when your excuse is we don't have enough people, then it's like saying, well, what people do you decide to help and what people do you not decide to help? When you have someone, we did a show about a woman who, wire fraud, someone hacked in and got her for $135,000. Well, at what point should the FBI be saying, maybe we should be looking into this and helping? But what they say is, when it's going to Nigeria, which is what happened, they can't stop it. So I question, where's the bank's liability when you go into a bank and say, hey, I'm wiring for this transaction. shouldn't the bank be double-checking that wire transfer number first to say, yeah, it goes to the title company? But, because somehow, if it's going to Nigeria, you would figure that code would show that it's not going to the title company, it's going to Nigeria, but there doesn't seem to be any liability.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. This doesn't ring quite right in that story, because if you're wiring out of the country, it's different coding. It's a different system.
Yeah.
I think it's Swift. They use Swift or something like that, whatever it is. But it's not the same wire system.
Right. And then in this case, this was a woman in her 70s who lost her life savings because of this particular, terrible. The other ones, too, are the phone calls. I don't know if you get them. I get the ones that say, hey, this is your credit card company calling. It's an automated call.
Oh, I just hang up on those. I hang up on all the automated ones. And then I did something when I get these other calls. What I did was I downloaded 9 pages of dirty words in Hindi. So,
okay.
So when they call me and they got the Indian accents, I just go through my list. And
oh, no.
That usually works.
Well, hopefully they don't call you back. I put them in a blacklist app on my phone, but it doesn't matter because what they do is they
use different numbers.
The first 6 numbers. They use the first 6 numbers.
I think they buy magic
jacks.
local
to you.
Yeah, they buy these magic jacks, and they just use them till they get worn out, then they switch them.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I had a friend who was scammed out of all his money to Nigeria because he went online and saw what looked like a legitimate Netflix subscription. And so you can't, now I sit here and I go, if PayPal can't take down the listing with the fake phone number, how do you know when you see something online that you actually have the right phone number? And what's disturbing, a lot of times, even when you get your utility bills, for example, they hide their phone numbers. They put their website, but they hide their phone numbers because they really don't want to deal with people on the phone anymore.
Well, that's true. It's hard to reach almost anyone on the phone today. It really is. Interesting.
I don't know, but and the other thing I think with Christmas now is debit cards. I don't use debit cards because there's so much fraud with debit cards. If you use your debit card and somebody gets that information, they could just drain your bank account. Now, you may be covered, but it could take weeks to months to get your money back, whereas if you just use a credit card, you have merchant protection in most cases. So I don't use
it is safer, no question about it. No question, it is safer about it. But there's so many crooks out there. You just every time you think you got it figured out, they're going to come up with another one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you heard, but Facebook, I think, just a few days ago, got hit. Somebody hacked in and took all the the draft photos that didn't make it onto people's individual pages, and they must have gotten millions of photos. And so it's almost like a game to these hackers. But most people don't even have their Facebook shut down to private, which means anyone can look at your Facebook information. If they want to perpetrate a scam, it's really pretty easy. If you lock it down to private, it makes it not impossible, but much more difficult for people to see what's going on your page. And you'd be surprised. Like, I sit here and think, Stu, if I were a thief, I would be looking on Facebook going, look, this person's on vacation for a week. They won't be back. Or, they're checking in at some restaurant.
No, you're right.
If I were a criminal, I'd be looking at that.
I just personally don't know why anyone would even want to use Facebook for anything. I mean, what is the purpose of putting out everything in your life? Now, we use it for a business, and for a business, it's fine, and we have somebody that does it for us. I don't even look at it. But why do I want to tell everyone everything about my life? They can use that information to kidnap your kids. They can use it for anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I use it more for fun, or I'm reposting things, and I'm a dog person, but I don't post my entire life on Facebook for everybody to know. No, there's
but so many people do.
And so you know where they are. I mean, geez, it would make it real easy for a private investigator if they were checking on you to just look at your Facebook page. And I know, for example, mortgage companies actually look at Facebook pages to see what their clients are doing. Like, have they gone on vacation? Have they brought out and bought a car or boat? Yep. So, if you have a Facebook page, I think you should have it, have it private at least. Your public pages for business are good.
Yeah, for business, that's a different thing. That's an ad. It's a cheap way to advertise. But, what I think is just as stupid is I see these people driving with their SUVs, and on the back they got 3 kids, a dog. I mean, they told everybody just looking at their car what they got. Their whole life is sitting there on the windshield.
Exactly. people don't realize they think it's fun and it's cute. And, me, I live in a house that's alarmed. I have a huge dog. I have cameras, so I can see. A lot of people don't have that, but don't advertise.
Definitely make a note not to rob you. I'm not going to rob your house.
Yep, I'm pretty safe. I have a 142-pound dog. I don't think anybody would even try.
Okay, would you just keep doing your karate?
Yeah, that's it. All right, well, let's do this. I want to go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right. I said I think we'll do a short break. And my guest should be here from the break when we come back, so stay with us, and we'll be back in a moment.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sue. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, 844-920-7200.
And we're back on Fraudsters Radio on AM/FM 24/7. And we've been talking about all kinds of fraud and scam. We try to educate consumers. And so my special guest today is Ian Leavengood of Leavenlaw. Ian, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Laurie. Glad to be here.
Okay, my co-host Storm Bradford may try and join us a little bit later. He's running late. Now, Ian, I am a credit consultant, so I know quite a bit about credit, but I don't know the parts that you know, which is basically the FCRA and suing the credit bureaus. And so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions today, so hopefully you can clarify some of these things, especially for people listening to the show, because people don't seem to understand a lot about credit to begin with. Now, when I first learned, and I've been doing this for a little over 12 years, the first thing I said was, why don't the bureaus accept proof from consumers and making corrections? And actually, before you answer that, you know what? Let's go back a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into doing the FCRA and having Leavenlaw?
Sure, thanks. No, I'm happy to do that. So we are a consumer litigation firm located in West Central Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, and we represent consumers not only across the state of Florida, but we have clients throughout many states in the United States that deal with debt and credit. So our firm started way back, my granddad back in 1972, and between him and my father and myself, we've always helped consumers with debt and credit and problems that they may have. So the firm's done thousands of bankruptcies over the years. We've helped consumers with foreclosure defense problems. We've helped people try and avoid bankruptcy and resolving their debt and settling their debt without having to file. And so just naturally over the course of representing that many thousands of consumers on literally hundreds of thousands, if not candidly millions of trade lines or debts over the years, obviously it's probably not a surprise that we will find that many of those accounts have been credit reported incorrectly incident to the other representation that we've given these people. And so the fair credit reporting aspect of our firm and the representation that we give consumers really kind of came about naturally just because people would think that they've solved their problems with regard to debt, and lo and behold, they'll check their credit report 6 months, a year later, and the account that they thought that they had settled or that they thought that they had discharged or that they thought that they had paid, it's still being reported as, past due, a delinquent balance, money's owed, and of course they haven't gotten the benefit of the bargain that they came to our firm with. So very naturally we just started to help people try to then fix those credit problems. So when you say, why don't the bureaus accept proof from consumers and making corrections, it is a very astute question. And I guess the general first response is, well, they have to. They're certainly supposed to. It's just a question of, why don't they always do it, or, why are they not necessarily taking a consumer's word for it and allowing the negative credit reporting to still be out there. So the FCRA, I think that's what you'd called it earlier, so all our listeners out there understand that stands for the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It's a federal law, so it applies in all states, whether you're in the state of Washington or the state of Florida. It's the same law for consumers all across the state, and it requires that if there is an error on any consumer's credit report, to fix that error, and this is the first, I call it the threshold hurdle under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. A consumer must report the dispute to the bureaus first to try and fix the error or fix the reporting. Just reporting it to the creditor, like Bank of America or Wells Fargo or any other creditor that may be out there, doesn't ripen. It doesn't start your rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You must dispute to the bureaus first. So a lot of times, to make sure that dispute is effective, we always encourage our consumers either to get help of a professional that knows the law, and not just knows the law, but knows kind of the practical, the everyday inside and outs of how to navigate the law well and to make sure you're doing what's required to fix your credit. And that involves typically printing out documents, giving the factual basis on why this is being credit reported incorrectly, and then sending those documents as good old-fashioned attachments to your letter and making sure that that letter is sent to the address on the credit bureau's websites where disputes are to be sent. A lot of people will say, well, why would you print them out and send a letter? And that seems so yesteryear. Why not just go on the website and hit dispute? That's a good question, and there's a reason. Is the credit bureaus importantly when they control the form of your dispute and what you can and can't submit, it by definition doesn't allow a consumer to paint the entire picture, to give necessarily all of the evidence that supports their position. And so that's the first problem, is if you don't have the ability to tell your whole story, then the bureau many times is not going to update the report, because the creditor is just going to verify it as due and owing. And so I don't think that the credit bureaus don't accept proof from the consumers. It's just that you got to make sure you're making your case and telling your side of the story in an appropriate fashion, attaching all the documents that support your side of the story.
Gotcha. And I want to mention, just for the purposes of this show, that you're not giving any legal advice. We're just giving educational advice for the show. And
that's
so,
right.
So one of the things here, too, is when clients send out letters, they should be certified return receipt mail. That's my understanding. Otherwise, you can't really use it as legal proof if it's an email or you're disputing it by phone. So really, they need to send a certified return receipt letter, and especially if they have any proof, to include that and keep good documentation of any letters sent out and received, correct?
Absolutely, and that's really just a well-said add-on to what I was just talking about, is by doing it certified mail with your documents, you've got your green card. You can go to the USPS.com with your tracking number and verify when the Bureau received your report, because basically the Bureau has to, within a very short period of time after receiving your dispute, acknowledge to the consumer that the dispute has been received, and that they forwarded that information on to the furnisher of information, that's the term that's used under the FCRA, the creditor essentially, to let them know that this needs to be investigated. And so, that's the best way to do it, is with a certified letter, so you know when the Bureau actually received the dispute.
Now, one of the things I've always thought is that the credit bureaus, the consumer is not really the client, the paying client to the credit bureau. The creditors and the collection agencies are. They're the ones who are paying to subscribe. So do you think that slants things in favor of the the creditors and the collection agencies as far as the disputes are concerned?
Absolutely. I don't know that you're going to get any executive from any of the big three bureaus, Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, to necessarily admit that, but make no mistake about it, credit reporting and gathering information on the millions and millions of consumers that they do is big business. I mean, these are billion-dollar publicly traded companies that just have millions and millions, if not billions, of bits of information on consumers They slice, dice, gather that information depending upon what people want, and they sell that information, to their clients.
Right.
And the clients are the creditors and users. So it's not just the creditors, the people that furnish the information on consumers and how creditworthy they are or are not. But it's also then users of information. It's the people that are potentially extending credit. It's also people that might be considering hiring people, making an insurance decision, renting an apartment. So, this truly does affect almost every possible American that there could be out there. And those are the people that, by and large, are paying these credit reporting agencies' bills. So they do, I think, tend to lean or slant their business models and their process, procedure, and compliance in a fashion that advantages creditors and users of information, not the consumers themselves.
Right. And one thing I want to point out, most people think that when they send a letter to the credit bureaus, that someone is actually reading those letters. So I don't know, how much you're aware, but my understanding is that those letters are pretty much optically scanned, just like Monster does with resumes. They optically scan them for the key words, anything that's readable by their computers, and then it's converted into a 2-digit code. At which point that 2-digit code, the credit bureau can send out thousands of these 2-digit codes via their eOscar system, and basically it's just an electronic verification system on codes. The exception being if the letter's not readable, then it goes to someone in a foreign country. I think it's scanned someone in one of multiple foreign countries, where then they have to read it and manually input it. But a lot of times it's just scanned. So the creditor or the collection agency that's receiving the information, they're not really seeing the actual dispute, correct? They're seeing the codes. Their computer is seeing the codes.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. You've hit on several points there, and obviously you're pretty well versed on this too, so congrats to you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when a dispute comes into a bureau, essentially it's digitized and it's sent off to the furnisher of information, and they respond, and this is all typically done electronically. There are statistics and studies out there that show on average less than 8 seconds is spent on any one dispute, and they communicate with what's called an ACDV, an automated consumer verification of dispute. And so that's really how these computers talk. And so, candidly, from a strategic standpoint, again, trying to represent consumers as best we can, that is why I don't want them using the website, because not only are they computers talking, but if you're using their own website, they're even further controlling what you can and cannot say. So that's why I like documents attached to a good old-fashioned letter, telling the story, showing the documentary evidence that supports why the debt isn't owed, why it was discharged, why it was paid, showing proof of canceled checks, why it's not late. And then when you have those documents, you've told the story in a letter and you send it certified mail, as we just discussed, to an address. If it comes back in one of these ACDVs where there's no human being that's read the letter, there's no human being that's looked at the documents, but all that's happened is one computer has talked to another in 8 seconds or less, if it becomes necessary to file a lawsuit to not only affect this consumer's credit report, to have it changed to what it should be, but also to establish potential damages if they haven't gotten credit or their credit has been reduced or denied as a result of this erroneous credit reporting. If, gosh forbid, they don't get a job, they don't have an apartment rented to them. These are literally exhibits that we would use, we need, candidly, to be able to prove up a case on behalf of this consumer who has had their credit slandered, if you will, and to be able to put our best foot forward to correct their credit report, try to get them damages for having their credit improperly credit reported, and then importantly, the creditor or the credit reporting agency, if we're successful, they generally speaking have to pay our attorney's fees and costs. So there's a reason, kind of starting with the end in mind, why making sure we're disputing in the correct form, through the correct processes and channels, and with the correct documents. It all really starts to make sure that we're doing the best we possibly can for the consumers with the incorrect credit reporting.
Got it. Now we're going to go to a quick commercial break, Ian. So when we come back, I got a lot more questions for you. Just stay with us.
Absolutely.
There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. Well, foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first. Identify errors that would void the contract. Identify regulatory violations. Identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent conduct. And the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, that's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.
And we're back on AM/FM 24/7 with attorney Ian Leavengood. And if you'd like to call in, the number is 646-668-8512. Ian, I want to ask you more about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. One of the things I've always wanted to know, why are merged files permitted? Because from what I understand, when a loan officer, for example, pulls somebody's credit by name and Social Security number, for example, an address, it seems to me from years of doing this that it pulls up people with similar information. It's very common with junior, senior, the third, people who are related. I had a client once who had a common last name, lived in an apartment next to someone with the same last name, and their files were a mess. And so it seems like it's too broad, it's general. When the information is inputted, it looks like their computers at the credit bureaus search for anything that might possibly belong, but may not belong at all to that specific person. Can you talk a little bit on that?
Absolutely. No, mixed files or merged files, I think is the term you used, are probably one of the they're not as frequent as just the general incorrect credit reporting item on someone's credit report, but they're probably the biggest problem. So while they may occur slightly less frequently, when they do occur, I mean, they can be just absolutely detrimental to an individual's credit, almost locking them down from a financial standpoint where they essentially can't qualify for any loans at all until the files are unmixed or unmerged. And in our litigation on these types of files, we find that files that are unmixed or unmerged many times will go right back to being remixed up or remerged because of the process and protocol that the bureaus have in place, their systems. These are algorithms that essentially are running, again, millions and millions of times a day. And so obviously whatever the problem was that mixed to Deborah's files or a senior and junior's files previously, unless the bureau literally calls timeout, goes and identifies the root cause of the problem on why these two files were mixed in the first place, a temporary deletion of the file or a temporary deletion of an account from the one person's credit report very regularly will end up just remixing again through the next business cycle or two. So mixed files are certainly a very, very big problem. Did a little bit of research before coming on just to give you some data, and in fact, of the consumer complaints regarding credit reporting, so FCRA credit reports to the Federal Trade Commission or the FTC, that's one of the governmental entities that is charged with oversight of the Fair Credit Reporting Act and dealing with complaints. There's also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a new consumer watchdog. But of the complaints under the FCRA, 44% of those that were significant enough to complain to the FTC or the CFPB involve mixed files. So again, bigger cases, bigger problems, things that aren't getting fixed, and so it's obviously a very material problem because it's almost half of the complaints that are lodged to the FTC. Of that group that complained to the FTC regarding their file being mixed or merged with someone else, it's roughly 2/3 of those mixed file cases are actually mixed with strangers. So it's not a senior or a junior or someone that has a similar name in the family. Ironically and remarkably, it's a complete stranger. It's two different Deborah Smiths. One may be D-E-B-R-A and the other is D-E-B-O-R-A-H. And those two different individuals that may be completely unrelated other than name, they may live in different parts of the country, remarkably will have their credit files mixed, and so credit cards and mortgages and student loans, maybe collection accounts, etc., that don't belong to one Deborah end up on the others. So 2/3 involve strangers, and it's only 1/3 that involves a senior or a junior or someone that has the same name. And we've litigated both types of cases, but both ones involving father-son and ones that involve consumers with similar names that don't know each other and live halfway across the country.
Right. The first thing I tell consumers is to look through the personal information on their credit report. Look at the names. Are there name variations? Are there more than one? Is there more than one Social Security number? That's kind of a clue a lot of times. The personal information as far as the addresses. Do you live at all of those addresses? And especially if there are a lot of credit lines that are not theirs that are reporting on the report, I think the personal information gives some clues to things that are being merged or mixed up. Correct?
Absolutely. I use this personal example every time. I still, and it's a bit ironic, an attorney that litigates over FCRA, one of my credit reports right now has my birthday as 1 month off. Okay, so it's the correct day of the month, it's the correct year, but it has the wrong month. And so that's a prime example, one relatively innocent piece of information. If there's another person named Ian out there that has a birthday on that day, a credit reporting agency may see that birthday, may see the same first name, and just say, well, that has to be associated with this person. And that's a prime example or a gateway on how the algorithms and the processes that the bureaus have could take someone else, someone named Ian that doesn't live in the state of Florida, that has a birthday on the day that's reported in my file, and that's the gateway to putting that other person's credit accounts on my file. So yes, looking at your date of birth, looking at other addresses that show up. There's even sections on the credit report that will talk about where people have been employed, obviously previous addresses. So making sure that what may seem as innocent information that is incorrect at first, making sure that is removed from the credit report proactively before any problem comes up can be a preventative mechanism, a preventative measure that helps to avoid a potential mixed file in the future. So yeah, looking at those bits of demographic information is certainly very important, either in trying to avoid it or if your file has already been mixed or merged, trying to understand and decipher why this has happened.
Okay. Now, obviously I read a lot about this stuff. So I know that people have sued the credit bureaus for millions of dollars and won. How do you know as an attorney when to sue a bureau? I mean, I know there are cases, for example, if somebody was trying to qualify for a home and there was incorrect information that was detrimental, so of course now their FICO scores are going to be lower and they're going to get a much worse interest rate. But sometimes they have to close, on that because otherwise they're going to lose the contract on their home, which depends a lot of times on the selling of their home. So they have to do it. But how do you determine when is the right time to sue a bureau, and maybe give some examples of cases, either past cases or other big cases, so our listeners will kind of get an idea of what happens.
Absolutely, happy to do it. So, it's a great question, and I'll tell you, Lori, it's also from a professional standpoint, and when I'm having the discussion with the clients, it can be a frustrating answer that I give, and let me explain why. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, is a statute that requires a good faith opportunity for the bureaus and/or the furnishers of information to fix the alleged wrong before you can just run off and sue them, so to speak. Okay, each of these parties, when you're talking about incorrect credit reporting information in a consumer's credit report or credit file, you have to dispute the inaccuracy. Okay, the dispute, again, as we talked about briefly earlier, must be sent to the gatekeeper, the bureaus. It's not enough to just send the dispute to the creditor or the mortgage company. You must, to ripen your rights, to meet the prerequisite of the law, you got to dispute first to the bureau. The bureau is then required under the FCRA to take the information that you just sent to them, and as we, again, briefly talked about, send it off to the creditor. The creditor then has 30 days to investigate the dispute and report back the results of that investigation to the Bureau. The Bureau then must evaluate those investigation results and do what is called a quote-unquote reinvestigation and report all of those results back to the consumer. So that is the prerequisite. It's a relatively long dance that must occur before a consumer can sue a furnisher of information for incorrect credit reporting under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, while it takes that long, or they have that long, I should say, under the statute to do it, many times the investigation results won't take that long, as we just talked about. If an ACDV is responded to in 8 seconds, they may not need the full 30 days. But you have to go through this prerequisite before you have a right to sue under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So to go to your practical example, and it's a very astute point in question, because this happens all the time in our office. Someone is trying to close on a home. Someone's at the car dealership wanting to buy a car, and something is showing up on their credit report that's incorrect. Well, it's frustrating, and in this day and age, especially with automation and technology the way it is, most people want it fixed yesterday. They want it fixed very quickly, and obviously this is an impediment standing behind the home of their dreams or getting the car that they need. And so one of the practical considerations that I have to have with most people is, hey, I'm happy to help, and it sounds like you've got a good case, but it's going to take a little bit of time before we can just file suit. So after those results come back, if they verify the credit reporting as accurate, even though we know that it's not, now the consumer may have a case against either the credit reporting agency or the furnisher of information that has just verified as correct data that we know is inaccurate or incomplete. So do you sue immediately? Do you dispute again? There really isn't a right answer on that. I know a lot of the people that do what I do, which, by the way, there's probably less than 200 people in the United States that really do fair credit reporting litigation. It's a decently complex law, and not many attorneys have been too involved in it. Yeah. But there's an ongoing dispute that you should dispute again, because maybe if you give a little bit more information or you tell them why the results of their investigation are incorrect, that may be a path of least resistance to trying to get it updated quicker, because a lawsuit, if you file a lawsuit and an attorney is involved, and these are all federal court cases, so they tend to take at least a year to a year and a half, it's not going to get you to your mortgage approval or your car approval very quick. So as a general rule, we will usually dispute at least a couple times to try and get the credit report corrected prior to filing suit. Right. But if they don't, you do then have a right to file suit for the inaccurate information. The Fair Credit Reporting Act does provide what's called statutory damages. So if you can show that a furnisher of information, the creditor, or a credit reporting agency acted intentionally or willfully or with such negligence that it was a reckless disregard for a consumer's rights, that's legal mumbo-jumbo, but those are the words that the statute and the law requires. You can get statutory damages, which is between $100 and $1,000, and they are, of course, required to pay the attorney's fees that the consumer incurred in trying to get their credit report fixed. If you can also prove actual damages, meaning as a result of the negative credit reporting or the incorrect credit reporting, you have been harmed, your interest rate on the mortgage that you got was a couple percentage points higher than had the incorrect information not been on the report, or if you had a credit line that was closed down or reduced because of the incorrect credit reporting, if you can point to something that's an actual tangible damage, you of course would have the ability to try and recover those actual damages as well. In the most egregious circumstances, and this is usually involved after multiple disputes and multiple efforts to provide information showing that the credit reporting is incorrect, if they continue to credit report it, the statute also provides for punitive damages, and those are usually if consumers are searching online and they see the big $1 million verdicts against bureaus. Those are usually punitive damage claims and the result of the most egregious fact patterns after multiple disputes and no results.
Gotcha. All right. We're going to take one more quick break. We're going to come back with some more questions. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Consumers, do you have bad credit? Can't purchase a house or car? Paying too much in interest on your credit cards and loans? Scammed by credit repair companies? There is hope. You can get back on track and do it the right way. Call Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Or go to crediteducationconsultants.com now and get the help you need. Don't delay. Call today. Mortgage reps and realtor inquiries are also welcomed.
And we're back on Fraudsters Radio, AM/FM 24/7, with attorney Ian Leavengood talking about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, let me give you a couple questions.
Hey, Laurie, I'm here.
Storm is with us. How are you, Storm?
I've been listening. The whole time. Our producer must be asleep.
Oh, okay. Well, he didn't. Yeah, Ian, Storm Bradford is my co-host. He's a litigation consultant, so we're going to let him join in. But, Storm, I do want to ask Ian. He's really good, and I have a couple of questions for him.
But I had a question for Ian first. I think it's a really important question. It's dovetailing on what he's saying. Ian, is there as you know, under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, if a debtor brings something in bad faith, they have to pay the legal fees for the other side. Is there the same thing in the Fair Credit Reporting Act?
Question. So most of these consumer statutes, the Fair Credit Reporting Act is the one we've obviously been talking about with Lori here a lot today. The FDCPA, or the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act that you just talked about, that's a related statute that governs and prohibits certain unlawful debt collection practices. Both of those statutes have what I call a non-reciprocal attorney fee provision. The reason that these statutes have non-reciprocal provisions means consumers can go out and hire attorneys to try and vindicate these wrongs, and they have the ability to do so without fearing that if they lose, they're going to now owe Wells Fargo or Equifax or these giant companies what would be very expensive and large attorney fees. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you've got a consumer protection statute and someone's trying to fix what may be, relatively speaking, small wrongs compared to $1 billion company, it would have a chilling effect if every time a consumer thought, gosh, what if I challenge this and for some technical reason I lose? I would take a bad situation and make it horribly worse. So what you focused in on is absolutely correct, is a consumer does not have to pay a creditor or a credit reporting agency's attorney's fees unless there's an allegation that the case was brought in bad faith. So that means there's no justice, there's no facts, there's no law that could ever support the argument being made. And then, of course, the court, listens to the argument and agrees and finds that this case never should have been brought. If there's absolutely no good faith basis why the case ever should have been brought, only in those very narrow circumstances would a consumer ever have to pay the other side's attorney's fees. The important thing on that, though, is if you go to an attorney that knows these laws, the FCRA and the FDCPA, because they're taking these cases on a contingent basis, meaning if someone ever hires me on either one of these cases, a Fair Credit Reporting Act case or a Fair Debt Collection Practice case, they don't have to pay any attorney's fees to me up front. I take it on a contingency basis, meaning I only get paid, A, if I prevail, and B, by the creditor or the credit reporting agency. So if you got a good attorney that's also a good businessman or woman, they're not going to invest their time and money on a fact pattern that not only does it not have a good chance at winning, but that arguably could get you sanctioned. It's just a waste of time and money. But it is an important fact to realize that these statutes, while they're here to protect consumers, they shouldn't just be taken casually or lightly with people making bad claims and filing lawsuits without a factual basis to support it. So as long as you've done your disputes and you've got your documents and you send them in to the bureaus and creditors are taking 8 seconds to review it and saying, nope, you owe it, I mean, you're going to be in good position not to have to worry about paying their attorney's fees as long as you cross your T's, dot your I's, and you approach these cases correctly.
All right, good answer. One of the things I wanted to find out, now, we talked earlier, for people who are purchasing homes, let's say they do get into a home, but there's been an ongoing issue, that's an FCRA issue, but they have to close on the home. Can they come back to you after the fact because maybe now they're paying, the higher interest rate, which of course costs them a lot more money? Can they come back afterwards if they had no choices but to close right then?
Sure, and ironically, not only can they may have to. That's a very similar to a fact pattern that I've had just recently with a client where there's a dispute. There's a trade line on his account that he says that he paid, and so because he paid it, not only should it not be on there, but it shouldn't be reported as 30, 60, 90 days late with a past due balance. So we went through and disputed multiple times, and the furnisher of the information verified it as true, accurate, and correct. And this client had very, very good credit before this error occurred, and so he still was able to get a mortgage. He was still able to get approved for the loan, but the mortgage broker told him, this isn't going to be the best rate that's advertised out there. I can get you approved and get you into your home, but you're not going to be paying, 4%, you're going to be paying 6%. So the tough conversation I have to have with that client is, look, at the end of the day, if this is a home that you want for you and your family and you can get it, unfortunately you may have to close on it, and then we're just going to have to use the disputes, use the documentation that you've provided me and that we've sent to the bureaus to show why you've been damaged. And now that's an example, Lori, not of the statutory damage that we talked about, but that's an actual damage. I can run two different amortization schedules on the loan, one at 4%, one at 6%, and at some point it becomes relatively easy math. The delta between the two is a measure, or at least a good faith basis of a measure of actual damages that we would be asking either the furnisher of the information, or in some cases the credit reporting agency as well, to contribute toward getting the case resolved in the form of an actual damage. So yeah, in some circumstances, not only can they close on the home, they may have to close on the home to show that that's an actual damage.
Gotcha. Storm, I have another question, but do you want to ask one first?
No, I just getting back to what Ian was saying about damages. I know when we analyze mortgage transactions, we look for things that could be used as far as what we call credit reputation damage. And I know that that's part of what you do, that if you can show that, the borrower's credit reputation was damaged, you're now talking even punitive damages, are you not?
You can, and we talk about that briefly. I mean, punitive damages, usually you have to show a reckless disregard for the consumer's rights or some type of intentional or willful conduct that's kind of malicious to the consumer. So to show punitive damages, in my experience, you usually have to have multiple disputes. You have additionally, in each dispute, you provide increasingly more information to further explain to the bureau and or the furnisher of information why they're wrong and why their responses to previous disputes is just wholesale inadequate. And if they continue to just either disregard the disputes altogether, or they're just, they're flying in the face of common sense results, then when we do file the suit, we're asking not just for statutory damages, not just for actual damages, but you certainly can ask for punitive damages. The one thing that's a trick about punitive damages, and again, when most consumers or people in the in the United States read about it, those are cases that actually usually go to trial. Okay, so in my experience, never once do I send a demand letter asking for $1 million of punitive damages, and the creditor or the bureau is going to accept it and pay the punitive damages early on in a settlement. Okay, it's almost always you're going to have to take them to task and go to a jury, where a jury is going to listen to the facts and circumstances, see that these companies, these publicly traded billion-dollar corporations, are just running roughshod over consumers' rights repeatedly, knowingly, and if they do that, then you can find juries that may want to hold them accountable in the form of punishing them for their incorrect conduct. And so that's when you're going to see and read about punitive damage awards. They're available, but they are rare, not because attorneys aren't good attorneys and they're not good advocates. It's just most people don't want to go through multiple depositions, 2 years of litigation, sit through a 3-day trial.
Right.
In my experience, most people get my credit fixed, make me as whole or make me whole as you possibly can, and let me move on with my life. And so, 90 to 95% of the time, it's the threat of punitive damages with a good, rock-solid case built on solid factual foundation that's going to get people the result that they want.
And I think, again, a point that you brought up just a few minutes ago about going to somebody who is, quote, an expert in the field is really the way to go, because I guess any attorney could take a case to sue under the under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But, as you pointed out, going to an expert who does this all the time is going to do it more elegantly than someone that doesn't, and they're not going to get themselves in trouble with with possibly, a bad faith lawsuit or something like that. So it's necessary and imperative, as far as I'm concerned, is that if someone feels that they have a problem with the Fair Credit Reporting Act or the FDCPA, either of those, if they go to somebody who does this all the time, it's just common sense.
Yeah, no, and they're federal laws. Federal laws, federal courts. These are men and women appointed by the President of the United States that listens to these cases and controversies, and so it's kind of a different poker table. The stakes are a lot higher. The requirements and the resources, frankly, that are required to litigate these cases, it's different than just going to necessarily a solo practitioner, a small firm that's right around the corner. There's, the first conference I went to, guys, on the Fair Credit Reporting Act was Memphis, probably 8 years ago. I think there were 40 people in the United States in the audience that were studying this type of law. There's just not a lot of people that do it. I've been to four of these conferences since then. I've spoken at several of them. We're now up to about 200. So when you're talking 200 attorneys that focus on a federal law, and that's from all 50 states, there's just not that many people that do it.
That's 4 lawyers in every state.
That's right, and I bet Montana doesn't have 4. So there's so yeah, right. I think Florida. We're in Central Florida, Tampa Bay area. Yeah, it sometimes my paralegals and the attorneys I work with, I'm like, how did someone from Atlanta, reach out to us down here in Tampa to talk to us about a problem they're having on their credit report? I mean, sometimes I'm shocked that there's not someone else between us and Atlanta down, I-75 that they would have come to before. But at the end of the day, when you do have attorneys that kind of focus on consumer issues, federal litigation, they've been doing it a while, and not just doing it a while, but having success doing it, and they have the resources to take these companies on. And then, candidly, it gets to the point you have credibility. The attorneys, for instance, if I'm ever litigating with Equifax, I know the attorneys are out of Atlanta. I know the name of the firm. I know the name of the 2 to 4 attorneys that are going to be representing them. They know us. They respect us. That they certainly know that we're not just casually representing people. And so I think that we can leverage that to get a better result for clients, and typically a quicker result for clients. So if you do have problems on your credit report, I'm not saying we're the only shop in town that does it, but you do want to do your research and make sure you find someone that has done these cases before and has the resources and the intellectual capacity to really help you. Otherwise, big companies are going to try and take advantage of you in the dispute process.
And you could get yourself waived in Georgia in the federal court, and you could represent them.
You could, yeah. So there's a process called pro hoc vice. It's a Latin term, but essentially what that means is I do have to find someone to vouch for me, but the organizations that I was just talking about, I generally speaking do know attorneys throughout the United States, because we kind of band together and try to learn together and help each other out. And so if I have a client that's in a jurisdiction that I'm not licensed, I can pro hoc into that jurisdiction and still essentially litigate the case from afar. And when you're in federal court, it's different than the Perry Mason days that you see where everyone's always standing in a courtroom with people. In federal court, most of these decisions are what we say they're decided on the papers. It's a motion practice, and it's people that are reading the motions, and the vast majority of these decisions are made via electronic filings without the need for physical appearance. It's just trials, depositions, mediations. There's certain things you have to appear for, but yeah, a lot of these cases I can handle around the country from down here in Florida.
And that's the answer. So if I wanted you specifically, I could get you if I'm in Georgia, I'm in Tennessee, I'm in the Carolinas. If I really want you, I can get you.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm also I'm licensed in Colorado. I'm licensed in Illinois. I'm about to get licensed in North Carolina. But even if it's a state that I'm not currently licensed in, if it's someone that needs help, and I guess to back up a little bit, the dispute process, that's not a court. I could help anyone draft the letters, write the disputes, and a lot of times we do get credit fixed without having to go to litigation, which candidly is what most people want. Most people want their credit fixed. Right. They want it fixed yesterday, and they want to move forward. So the dispute process, Seattle to Miami, New York City to San Diego. I can help anyone with that. If you're going to be filing a lawsuit and we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we've done our homework in advance, and they're still not getting the result that you want, and we need to file a lawsuit to vindicate your rights, then yeah, absolutely, I can still help them. I just will have to pro hoc into that jurisdiction to file the suit. But yes, we can do that.
Right. Now, guys, we have to actually close. I think Storm, we have to have Ian back because I still have a list of questions. So I think we're going to have you back, Ian, for another show. I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and Storm for popping in. And we're going to close it out now. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Fraudsters Radio. You can join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we do want to hear your stories, and you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.